The twin suns of Elira were setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet. The great stone plaza of the alien city was filled with people. Thousands of Illyrians stood in silence, waiting for the elders to appear. It was the evening of the off-world ritual, the most sacred event in their culture. Every 50 years, one chosen soul was sent away in a ceremony older than memory. To most of the Illyrians, it was an honor. To the one chosen, it was a fate without choice. Among the crowd stood Ethan Cole, a human ambassador from Earth. He had been on Elira for several months, working to build peace and understanding between his people and the Illyrians. His tall figure and plain human clothes made him stand out among the shimmering garments of the Illyrians, but he had grown used to the curious glances. Still, tonight felt different. Tonight, he was not just an observer. He could feel something heavy in the air, something that made his chest tighten. At the far end of the plaza, the council of elders emerged from the towering stone archway. They walked slowly, leaning on staffs carved with glowing symbols. Their faces were calm, their eyes filled with a sense of importance. The crowd bowed their heads in silence. Behind them walked a young woman, Leora. Her wrists were clasped in bands of light, not painful but firm, as if woven from pure energy. Her long hair shimmered silver blue in the fading sunlight, and her eyes, bright and deep, carried both fear and quiet strength. The crowd murmured as she passed. Some whispered blessings, others watched with solemn pride, but no one asked if she wanted to be there. Ethan noticed. He watched her carefully. While the Illyrians celebrated her as the chosen one, he saw something they seemed blind to. Her steps were heavy, her gaze lowered, her shoulders tense. She was not walking with honor. She was walking with resignation. The elders guided her to the center of the plaza, where a great circle of stone marked the ritual site. Carved lines stretched outward like rays of the sun, glowing faintly as if the stones themselves remembered the thousands of ceremonies performed before. An elder raised his staff. His voice echoed across the plaza, strong despite his age. Tonight, we give to the stars what is most precious to us. Tonight we send Leora beyond Elira, so that the balance of our world remains. This has always been our way, and so it shall be. The crowd repeated his words in unison, a chant passed down through centuries. Ethan remained silent. He folded his arms and looked again at Leora. Her eyes met his for just a second, and in that moment he saw something that unsettled him. Plea, quiet and hidden, but real. She wanted someone to see her, not as a chosen sacrifice, but as a person. The ritual continued. The elders circled her, chanting in the Illyrian tongue. The light bands around her wrists glowed brighter, connecting to the glowing lines on the ground. The air vibrated softly, filled with energy. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He remembered what he had learned about the ritual. Long ago, Illyrians believed their world was protected by higher forces beyond the stars. To keep balance, they would send one of their own through a gate of energy. No one knew what truly happened after. Some believed the chosen lived among the stars as guardians. Others whispered that they were lost forever. But Ethan, as a human, could not ignore the simplest question. Was this truly necessary? He had asked before, but the elders gave him only one answer. It is tradition. It is honor. That answer never sat well with him. The plaza grew brighter as the ritual energy built. The stone lines pulsed like veins of light, connecting to Leora's bands. The crowd murmured, some in awe, some in sorrow. Children clutched their parents' hands, watching with wide eyes. Ethan's heart pounded. He wasn't supposed to interfere. He was an ambassador, not a judge of alien culture. His mission was peace, not disruption. And yet something inside him told him this was wrong. He remembered Earth's own past, centuries of rituals, sacrifices, and customs that once seemed sacred but were later seen as cruel misunderstandings. Humanity had made mistakes, but they had also learned. They had learned to listen, to question, to change. As he stood in the crowd, Ethan whispered under his breath, "This isn't honor. This is loss." Leora's gaze swept the crowd again, as if searching for a final sign of hope. When her eyes met Ethan's once more, something passed between them. A silent connection, fragile but undeniable. She did not speak, but her eyes said clearly, "Help me." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He clenched his fists. The elder raised his staff again. The ground hummed louder. The air shimmered like heat rising from stone. The ritual was reaching its peak. Soon the circle would open and Leora would be taken. Ethan's mind raced. He thought of his orders from Earth. Respect their customs. Do not interfere. He thought of the trust he had built with the Illyrians, trust that could vanish if he acted against them. He thought of the possible consequences: conflict, misunderstanding, exile. But then he thought of Leora, a person, a life, a voice silenced by tradition. His decision began to take shape. The elder spoke once more. "The moment is near. Let her path be opened. Let balance be kept." The ground flared with light. The circle glowed bright enough to blind. The energy wrapped tighter around Leora, pulling her gently toward the center. She struggled slightly, her face showing fear now, not peace. Ethan stepped forward. Just one step. His boots echoed on the stone. Some Illyrians turned their heads, surprised that the human ambassador moved when all others remained still. He took another step. His heart hammered in his chest, but his mind was clear. A third step carried him out of the crowd and toward the ritual circle. The elders turned, their chants faltering for the first time. The plaza grew quiet, save for the hum of energy. Ethan's voice broke the silence. It was firm, steady, and carried across the gathering. "Stop." The word rang like a bell. Every eye turned to him. Thousands of Illyrians stared. The elders frowned, their glowing staffs raised. Ethan stood tall, his gaze fixed on Leora. She froze, shock in her eyes, but behind it a spark of hope. He spoke again, louder this time. "This isn't right. She's not leaving, not like this." The energy flickered. The crowd gasped. The ritual had been interrupted. For the first time in centuries, the silence of tradition was broken, and for the first time in her life, Leora's lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile. The plaza of Illyria stood frozen in silence. The twin suns had dipped lower, leaving the sky a dark violet canvas streaked with stars. The ritual circle glowed brighter than the heavens themselves, humming with power. But all of that seemed to pause the instant Ethan Cole spoke. His voice, simple and steady, echoed through the stone courtyard. "Stop. She's not leaving." "Not like this." The people gasped. Some stepped back as though his words themselves had disturbed the sacred lines etched into the ground. The elders, their staffs raised high, turned to him with expressions both shocked and stern. Never in living memory had anyone dared to break the silence of the off-world ritual. Leora stood at the center of the glowing circle, her wrists still bound in threads of light. For a moment, her wide eyes fixed on Ethan. She had not expected anyone to speak for her, least of all a human outsider. The faint spark of hope she had felt when their eyes first met now flickered brighter, like a fragile flame catching against the wind. An elder with a tall, curved staff stepped forward. His name was Elder Varen, the oldest among them, his silver, skin lined with the weight of centuries. His voice carried across the crowd, calm yet edged with authority. "Human ambassador, you walk on dangerous ground. This is not your place. This is not your way." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he stood firm. "It may not be my way," he answered, "but I know when something is wrong, and this is wrong." The words stirred the crowd. Some Illyrians murmured, in agreement, their voices low but real. Others shook their heads, whispering about the boldness or the foolishness of a human interrupting what had been sacred for generations. Another elder, Elder Sira, lifted her hand. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the light of the ritual circle. "You speak of right and wrong," she said, her voice sharp. "But you do not understand our history. This ritual keeps balance. Without it, Illyria would fall into chaos. Do you wish to doom us all, human?" Ethan did not look away. I don't wish to doom anyone, but I've seen enough to know when fear is disguised as tradition. Look at her. He gestured toward Leora. Does she look honored? Does she look free? Or does she look like someone forced into silence because no one dares to question you? The silence that followed was heavier than stone. The people shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced toward Leora. For the first time, some saw what Ethan saw. Her trembling hands, her lips pressed tightly as though holding back words she could never say. Her eyes filled not with pride but with quiet terror. Leora's heart pounded. No one had ever spoken like this for her. No one had ever dared. Her throat ached, wanting to speak, but the ritual's bonds weighed on her voice, keeping her silent. The ritual energy wavered. The glowing bands flickered slightly, as though reacting to Ethan's defiance. The elders frowned, noticing the disruption. Elder Varen's voice grew stern. This is not your concern. Step back. You have no claim here. But Ethan took another step forward, standing at the very edge of the glowing circle. His shadow stretched into the light. His voice carried strength not just for Leora but for everyone watching. I may not have a claim, he said firmly, but I have a choice, and I choose to speak when I see Samo. The ritual circle blazed with light, brighter than fire, brighter than the stars. Ethan stood in the center, his body bound by glowing strands of energy. They coiled around his chest, his arms, even his legs, pulling him toward the heart of the circle. Yet instead of collapsing or crying out, Ethan held himself upright. His eyes were open, steady, and calm. The Illyrian crowd stood in silence, too stunned to move. Never had anyone, not in all the long centuries of memory, taken another's place in the off-world ritual. Never had anyone, let alone a human, chosen the binding willingly. Leora's breath came fast, her heart pounding. She had been freed only moments ago. The light that once chained her now released into the air. She stood at the edge of the circle, her hands pressed against the invisible barrier that kept her from reaching him. The energy shimmered under her palms, warm and alive but unyielding. Why are you doing this? She whispered again, her voice trembling. You don't even know me. Ethan's eyes shifted toward her through the glowing veil. His lips curved into the faintest smile, quiet but unshaken. Because it doesn't matter if I know you, he said. What matters is that you deserve a choice. Everyone does. The words struck her harder than the brightest light. A choice. It was something she had never been given, not once in her life. The elders stepped forward now, their staffs raised high. Elder Varen's voice thundered above the humming energy. This cannot be. The ritual was not meant for him. It was meant for Illyrians to keep balance with the stars. His interference will bring ruin. But even as he spoke, the ritual reacted in ways no one expected. The energy strands wrapped tighter around Ethan, but instead of draining him, they pulsed with a strange rhythm, as if resonating with his heartbeat. The stone lines etched into the ground glowed brighter than ever, spreading light across the plaza and into the crowd. The Illyrians shielded their eyes, murmuring in confusion. Many had seen the ritual before, but never like this. The light had always been steady, predictable. Now it was wild, alive, as though the ritual itself had woken after a long sleep. Elder Sira narrowed her eyes, her voice sharp. This is wrong. The energy resists him. He is not Illyrian. His kind does not belong in this circle. Yet the more she spoke, the brighter the circle became. Ethan's body trembled slightly as the power surged through him, but he refused to fall. His voice carried over the sound of the energy, strong and steady. You say this ritual keeps balance, he said, but what balance is there in silence, in fear, in chains? You send away the young, the strong, the hopeful. And for what? So, no one has to ask the truth? The crowd stirred uneasily. For centuries, the off-world ritual had been unquestioned. To challenge it was unthinkable. But now, hearing a human speak aloud the doubts many had quietly buried, hearts began to shift. An Illyrian child, standing near her mother, tugged at her sleeve. Why does he say she didn't want to go? The child asked innocently. The mother, looked down, startled, and could not find an answer. Leora's throat tightened. She felt tears sting her eyes. No one had ever dared to put words to the thoughts she had kept hidden. No one. Until Ethan. Elder Varen raised his staff higher, his voice shaking with anger. Silence. You know nothing of our ways, human. You twist our truths. Without this ritual, our people would not survive. Ethan shook his head, his voice firm. No, without choice, no people truly survive. You don't protect them. You bind them in fear. The ritual's hum deepened, as if echoing his words. The circle's light swirled around him in waves, shifting colors. White, then blue, then gold. The elders exchanged worried glances. Something was wrong. The ritual had never behaved this way. Leora took a step closer, her hands pressing harder against the barrier. Ethan, she said softly, her voice shaking, you'll be destroyed. The energy wasn't meant for you, please. Don't do this. But Ethan's gaze remained steady. He looked at her, not with fear, but with quiet determination. If I can survive this, maybe it means the ritual was never meant to destroy anyone. Maybe it was misunderstood. Maybe all this time you weren't supposed to lose someone, you were supposed to learn something. His words made her heart stop for a moment. Learn something? The idea was so simple, yet it rang with truth. The crowd buzzed with whispers now. Some nodded, hesitantly agreeing. Others shook their heads, clinging to the weight of tradition. The elders grew restless. Their power, once absolute, was now uncertain. Elder Sira struck her staff against the stone. You are corrupting the people. This is not wisdom. It is arrogance. Ethan's voice cut through her words. No, this is defiance. And sometimes defiance is the first step to truth. The energy surged, flaring brighter around him. The bands of light pulsed like living veins, glowing in time with his heartbeat. The crowd gasped as sparks of light leapt outward, scattering across the plaza like falling stars. Some Illyrians raised their hands, and for the first time they felt the ritual's warmth, not its weight. Leora pressed both palms against the barrier, her tears falling freely now. She whispered to herself, though her words carried to him, You're changing it. You're changing everything. Ethan's lips curved again in that faint smile. No, he said softly, his voice almost lost in the hum of power. We're changing it. Together. The barrier between them shivered as though the ritual itself heard his words. For a brief second her hand passed through the light and she felt the warmth of his palm against hers. The bond lasted only a moment before the barrier snapped back, but the touch was enough to anchor her heart. The elders cried out in alarm. Elder Varen's voice rose above the noise. This cannot continue. We must end it now before the ritual tears itself apart. But before they could act, Ethan raised his head, his voice stronger than ever, carrying over the crackle of energy and the shouts of the crowd. You call this balance, he said, but balance is not silence. Balance is not sacrifice without choice. Balance is standing together, not tearing one another away. The crowd roared, not in anger but in agreement. For the first time, voices rose not to chant the words of the elders but to speak their own. Some shouted Ethan's name. Others cried out for truth, for freedom, for change. The elders' faces darkened. Their authority, unbroken for centuries, now trembled in their hands. Elder Sira struck her staff again, but the light did not respond as it once had. The ritual no longer listened only to them. It listened to the human and to the people. Leora's eyes shone with hope as she pressed closer to the barrier. She called out to him, her voice clear and strong now. Ethan, whatever happens, don't let go. Don't give them back my silence. He looked at her, his gaze unshaken, even as the energy coiled tighter around him. I won't, he promised. The circle flared one final time, brighter than the suns, brighter than the stars. The hum rose to a deafening pitch and then the world shifted. The ritual, bound in silence for centuries, had been defied. And with Ethan's choice, the first cracks in the wall of tradition had begun to break. The ritual circle pulsed like a living heart, flooding the plaza with blinding waves of light. The ground trembled beneath thousands of feet, yet no one moved. The Illyrian stood frozen, staring at the human who had done the unthinkable. Ethan Cole stood at the circle's center, bound by glowing strands of energy. The light pressed against him like a storm, yet he did not fall. His eyes stayed open, his breath steady. Every pulse of the ritual grew stronger, as if testing him, as if demanding to know if he truly belonged there. Across the barrier, Leora watched with trembling hands, pressed against the shimmering wall. The fear in her chest burned hotter with every second, yet it was mixed with something else, something new. Hope. The elders huddled together, their faces grim. Elder Varen's voice broke through the roar of energy. This cannot be. No human has the strength to endure the binding. It will tear him apart. But even as he spoke, the ritual seemed to resist his words. Instead of weakening Ethan, the bands of light glowed brighter with each heartbeat. The circle no longer hummed with steady rhythm. It pulsed in time with Ethan himself. Leora saw it too. Her lips parted in disbelief. "It's not destroying him," she whispered. "It's listening to him." Elder Sira struck her staff against the stone, her voice sharp. "He does not belong. The ritual is ours. Remove him before he corrupts it." But the crowd was no longer silent. Whispers spread, faster and louder. Some Illyrians began to murmur words they had never dared speak. Why does the energy follow him? Has the ritual been wrong all along? He speaks of choice. Could it be true? The elders tried to raise their voices above the noise, but the people's doubts had already taken root. Ethan's body shook slightly as the power swelled, yet his voice rang clear through the storm of light. "You say this ritual keeps balance, but balance is not built on fear. Balance comes from truth. And the truth is..." His words broke as the light surged violently, wrapping tighter around him. The crowd gasped. The bands pressed against his chest and shoulders, lifting him inches from the ground. His body arched as if the energy demanded more. His face tensed, but his eyes never closed. The truth is that no one should be forced to walk a path they did not choose. The circle blazed. The energy strands shivered, then split into countless threads of gold, wrapping around him not as chains but as wings of light. The crowd cried out as the ritual shifted before their eyes. For centuries they had seen the circle only as a gate. The plaza of Elira was quiet now, but the silence was different from before. It was not the hush of obedience. It was the quiet of wonder, of questions forming, of old beliefs shaking. Thousands of Illyrians stood in the glow of the fading ritual, light, their eyes still fixed on Ethan Cole and Leora, standing side by side at the center of the circle. The twin suns had finally set, leaving the sky deep violet, speckled with stars. The ritual's glow reflected on every face in the crowd, painting them in soft gold. The air was thick with anticipation. What had just happened was unprecedented. The off-world ritual had never changed like this. It had never responded to a human, and it had never been understood by so many. Elder Varen, his staff lowered, stepped forward. His voice shook as he addressed the crowd, though it carried the weight of centuries. We have been wrong. The ritual, we misunderstood it. It was never meant to take our young. It was meant to guide them, to connect them with the stars, to bring knowledge back to our people. The crowd murmured, unsure if they could trust their own elders. The elders who had always stood unshaken were now faltering. Elder Sira's face was hard, her eyes flashing with anger and fear. "You call this revelation? This is chaos. Tradition is broken. The humans twist our ways into lies. If we follow them, we lose everything." But the murmurs among the people were louder than her words. They had seen the visions. They had seen the truth. And for the first time they understood what the ritual had truly been. A bridge, not a cage. Leora stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "No, we don't lose anything. We gain knowledge, freedom, and choice. The ritual has been waiting for someone to understand it, and that someone is here. We can honor it, but we do not have to fear it. Ethan's body still hummed with residual energy. The golden strands of light that had bound him now floated around him like gentle ribbons, glowing faintly, as if the ritual itself acknowledged the new path he had chosen. He looked at the crowd and spoke, his voice calm but powerful. This has never been about power. It has never been about who rules or who decides. It has always been about understanding, about connecting with what we cannot see, about learning. The ritual is not meant to punish, it is meant to teach. And now it has taught us all something new, the value of choice and the value of courage. The crowd was silent again, but this time it was not the hush of fear. It was the hush of realization. Parents looked at their children differently, and children looked at their parents with newfound curiosity. No one had ever spoken about the ritual like this before. One young Illyrian stepped forward from the crowd. Her hands shook slightly as she raised them toward the circle. If this is true, she asked, why did no one understand it before? Why did the elders say it was sacrifice? Elder Varen lowered his head, his shoulders heavy. We did not know. Over the centuries, the original purpose was forgotten. We feared the unknown. We told ourselves it was protection. And so the story changed. Fear became law, and law became ritual. The people murmured again. The sound was a mixture of relief, anger, and awe. Leora looked at Ethan, a small smile breaking through her tears. You saved us, she said softly. Ethan shook his head slightly. I didn't save anyone alone. You saw the truth too, and so did they. We only needed courage to face it together. The elders exchanged glances. Their power, once unquestioned, now felt fragile. Elder Sira stepped forward, her voice quieter, though her anger still lingered. And what of the energy? The circle chose him, a human. How can this be right? It defies every rule we have known. Ethan took a careful step closer. The circle does not choose by rule. It chooses by understanding, by the readiness of the heart. I do not belong to your species, but I belong to the values the circle has always tested: courage, compassion, and honesty. That is why it responded to me. The people listened, their murmurs growing into voices of agreement. Some knelt, bowing their heads in reverence, not to the elders, but to the truth now revealed. Some raised their hands, reaching for the fading light of the ritual circle, hoping to feel its guidance, its warmth, and its promise. Elder Varen's eyes welled slightly with tears. We have misled our people, he admitted quietly. Not out of malice, but out of fear. The ritual demanded obedience. We gave rules instead of understanding. And now the truth stands before us. A ripple of sound moved through the plaza as the people began to cheer softly. The crowd was no longer bound by fear or silence. Their voices rose in unison, calling out for change, for wisdom, and for the courage to follow truth. Leora looked at Ethan, her hand brushing the glowing strands that lingered in the air. What now? She asked. Ethan's voice was soft, carrying hope. Now we learn. We teach. We share what the ritual was meant to show. Not fear, not obedience, but understanding. We can build something better, together. The crowd shifted toward the circle, their faces glowing in the golden light. Families, children, elders, and even the youngest observers, everyone moved closer, drawn by a sense of unity, a sense that this moment was theirs as much as anyone's. One elder, much younger than Varen or Sierra, stepped forward hesitantly. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. If this is true, she said, then we must change the way we honor the ritual. No one should be taken without understanding. No one should walk the path blindly. We must learn from the past and walk with the future. The crowd erupted in agreement, voices echoing against the plaza stones, singing, shouting, celebrating. It was a sound that carried across Elira, a sound of awakening, of freedom. Ethan lowered himself carefully as the last traces of energy faded, the circle no longer pulsing. He looked down at Leora, who reached up and took his hand. Their fingers, intertwined as the crowd watched, the gesture simple but full of meaning. "You've done more than I imagined," Leora said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "No," Ethan replied, squeezing her hand gently. "We've done it together. And now the people can see that tradition does not mean fear, ritual does not mean exile. Knowledge is stronger than silence." The elders, now humbled, stepped forward. Varen's voice was barely above a whisper, yet every ear heard it. "We owe a debt to the human and to our people. We will teach what we have learned. We will honor choice, we will honor courage." Even Sira lowered her staff slowly, her eyes still cautious. Yet the anger had softened into thoughtfulness. The ritual had changed, and even she could not deny it. The plaza erupted into applause and celebration. The citizens of Elira, young and old, cheered for freedom, for understanding, and for the human who had dared to stand against fear. They cheered for the young woman who had been freed. They cheered for the courage to face truth. Leora raised her voice and the crowd listened. "Let this day be remembered not as a loss, not as a sacrifice, but as a beginning of choice, a beginning of courage, and a beginning of unity between our people and those who come from far away, like him." The crowd roared. Their voices shook the plaza, carried through the city, into the streets, into homes, and beyond. Elira had been reborn in a single moment. Its people awakened to a truth that had been hidden for centuries. Ethan and Leora stood side by side, hands clasped, looking out over the crowd. Neither of them had expected the ritual to respond this way. Neither had expected the people to rise so quickly. But together they had sparked change. The golden strands of the ritual, now floating gently in the air, shimmered like tiny stars, a promise of guidance, wisdom, and a path forward. Leora whispered, "We've changed everything." Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the faces of Illyrians around them. "Not us alone. We've reminded them of what they always had inside, the courage to see the truth and the strength to choose it." As the crowd began to disperse, still talking, still sharing, still marveling at what they had seen, the sky above Elira stretched wide and clear. The stars shone brighter than ever, and somewhere among them, unseen but felt, the energy of the first builders of the ritual pulsed softly, approving of the change, of the unity, of the courage that had been shown. It was a new beginning, and, for the first time in centuries, the off-world ritual was truly understood, not as a path of loss, but as a path of light. The city of Elira woke the next morning to a sun that rose softer than any had seen for centuries. The twin suns spilled gold and violet across the stone buildings, but the people noticed something more. The light seemed gentler, kinder, as if the world itself had shifted overnight. The plaza, still faintly glowing with the remnants of the off-world ritual, was empty of the crowd, but its magic lingered subtle like a heartbeat in the stone. The golden strands of energy had dissolved, leaving only warmth in the air and the memory of what had just happened. Ethan, Cole, and Leora stood together in the center, looking out over the plaza. The human's hands were steady, though his chest still felt the echo of the ritual's energy. Leora's hand rested lightly on his arm, and for the first time since the ritual began, she felt truly safe. "Do you think they'll remember this?" Leora asked softly. Ethan nodded. "They will. Humans and Illyrians both remember moments that changed them. Today wasn't just a ritual, it was a lesson. They'll carry it forward." The first citizens began to arrive in the plaza, not in fear or duty but in curiosity. Children ran to the center, laughing, touching the stones with their hands. Parents followed, Esem,